Raw, real absolute wisdom. It is amazing how many people out there are afraid of failure. And this is the reason why this show has been created for people to find their way to pass through their failures, focus on their success, and know that failure is not actually failure, it is a form of learning. This podcast, the show is all about real people, real stories who've had challenges, who've had problems, who've had issues, and they have passed through them and are at a wonderful place in their life today. With us, we have the most wonderful, awesome, outrageous individual. His name is Arjun Aiyar. He's an MBA from Bond University, Australia. He's worked in his past life, as in his early years, for retail banking with ANZ Bank and ING Bank. And he has been in Dubai for over 11 years. He focuses on soft skills and behavioral training. He's an amazing, amazing coach that is a one to one life coaching scenario, which he's just wonderful at. He has a wonderful mentor. He always talks about Basil Harris, and he has this ethos of having freedom, having joy, and always being in a state of excitement. Let's join Arjun now. Welcome, Arjun. Welcome to Raw, Real Absolute Wisdom. A pleasure to have you here. And the reason being is because you are the first person who gave me the opportunity to go out and be an independent person in delivering the workshops which I've done in the past. And over the years, we've worked together quite a lot. For the listeners, Arjun is one of the most amazing people I've ever met, because he has given me something which very few people tend to give you, and that is the gift of his time. He's been a banker at one time of his life. He's actually done a couple of his own businesses. He will go into what he currently does, so we'll leave that for the moment. He's actually a black belt in karate, and nowadays he is a practitioner in yoga. So welcome, Arjun.
Thank you, Rohit, and kudos to you for setting up this series and adding value to people like myself. And you've always been energetic, enthused, excited in your demeanor. And this podcast and the series of podcasts is nothing but an expression and a continuity of who you are as a person. So, yep, absolutely. Let's get right into it.
Sure, let's get into it. Thank you very much for that. This is meant to be about you, not me. Now, I've known you, in fact, I think about 10 years.
Yes, you have.
Because before I started doing what I was doing,
Yeah.
I'd met you 2 years before that, and kind of a disconnect happened over there, and then I reconnected with you.
Indeed.
And since then, we know each other and have gone through ups and downs
Yes.
in many ways.
Yes.
Now, we'll come to what you're doing at the moment.
Yeah.
What our listeners would really want to know is, not just from a work perspective, but who really Arjun is, where does he originate from, what made him come over here. So from your younger days maybe, and how life has got you over here to in Dubai. Please.
True. Oh, thanks a lot for that, Rohit. And yeah, I've had quite a journey. I grew up in Mumbai, and that's the city where I'm originally from. And I was fortunate enough, blessed, I should say, to go to a school where there was a lot of focus on the English language and articulation and the way we speak. And soon thereafter graduated, and even in the younger years had the good fortune of traveling overseas, so got a peek into what the world looks like, how people are different, how philosophies, cultures, value systems vary from nation to nation, and indeed even within nations. And that kind of awareness created an interest and a spark in me which continues today. I was fortunate enough to have done my master's degree in Australia, did my MBA, and majored in finance and information systems.
Wow.
And was pretty convinced that I would go ahead and get a corporate job and do really well thereafter.
Which you did there for a while, didn't you?
True, actually, yes. All of 3 years.
All of 3. And was this in Australia or was it...
So I came back to Mumbai,
Okay.
and I worked with foreign banks in India. So I worked with the ANZ Bank. ANZ stands for Australia and New Zealand Bank. That was a very prestigious first assignment. So after getting an Australian degree, working for an Australian bank, and the world thought the best of me, flashing a business card that said manager, cash management services, ANZ Bank. So that was very powerful. Corporate banking was the domain at that point in time. Soon after that, I moved to ING Bank. I sold retail liabilities for some time. I can see from the look in your face, you have no idea what that is.
No, what's that?
But I could explain that to a finance person, or any finance professional listening to this would know exactly what I'm talking about. But the two major branches of banking, corporate and retail, apart from treasury, of course, is where I spent my career. And the world thought I was doing really well. I had a flashy business card, a lot of money in the bank. And for the most part, I was wearing a mask because I wasn't really happy with what I was doing. And there was a calling, there was a sense of purpose to do something bigger, something better, something that was more in resonance with who I really am. And therefore, one fine day, decided to quit my work and just go full time. So 1998 is when I became an entrepreneur and started the process of coaching and training in education and empowering. Worked a lot with entrepreneurs, university students, housewives, corporate professionals, et al. So yeah, that's the story in a nutshell. 2000, and then of course, fast forward to 2007 is when I came to Dubai for the very first time. Long story short, I've been on my own since 1998. So today's my 21st year that I haven't had a job. And yeah, so someone said, are you unemployed? I said, perhaps the better way to say it is I'm unemployable. So, but yeah, there you go.
It's interesting. So, why? So you did finance and information. Why finance and information? Now you're doing something else. Why?
Yes.
How come you decided to do that as an MBA?
Sure. And that's a great question, Rohit. And at that point in time, there was always desire, and a very strong desire within me was independence. Achieving financial prowess was a path towards that independence in my belief system at that point in time. I looked around and noticed in my environment where I grew up, folks who worked in the finance industry were economically pretty well off.
Okay.
They were paid well by foreign banking and financial institutions, drove good cars, lived in good homes, hung around with the who's who of society, and either voluntarily or involuntarily, I chose to subscribe to that thought pattern that therefore that's what I should be doing. And lo and behold, law of attraction kind of takes me in that direction, and I end up in a bank.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. Now, I know you do karate. When did you do that? When did you start with that?
So I got my black belt when I was 18 years old.
Okay.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I started training when I was 13. When I was in school, I was lanky, I was unhealthy, skinny. I'd get bullied a lot, physically very weak. I'd have these headaches because, I was lactose intolerant and all of that stuff. It played out. And I started watching Bruce Lee movies. And one fine day decided I've got to get my physical house in order, got inspired, and my first workout started with a flower vase that we had at home where I removed the flowers, and it was made of glass. It was heavy. I used that as a dumbbell and I started exercising, and it felt really good. That was like my first workout. Probably 11 or 12 years old, the whole concept of, okay, I want to exercise, really weird, back in the day. And then walking across the street, I heard the kiais, which is the shouting of the karate classes, meandered along, found my way to a class and signed up for one. And the first class, somehow I didn't connect with the teacher. I did that for 6 months, fell out of it. And a year later, convinced my mum to pay the fees again. And the second time around, it worked pretty well, and then stuck with it. And the teacher who has been a great inspiration for me even today, I think taught me more life values than physical fitness and strength. Perseverance being one of them, and humility being the other, I think, is what I imbibed from him at that time. Yeah.
So, which comes to the next question.
Yeah.
So taking the learnings from karate, from martial arts, how did you take that and apply it into your life and into your work, into relationships? How did you do that?
True. And that's a very... I'm glad you asked that, because when I connected with karate, I also connected with Eastern philosophy. And the yin-yang symbol of opposites, of unity and duality, of the normality of paradox is pervasive in ancient Eastern philosophy. A few years ago, I even studied the Tao Te Ching, which is written by Lao Tzu 2,500 years ago, and observed that my introduction to these concepts was when I was 13 years old and started the study of the martial arts. And our teacher would teach us that I'm teaching you to fight so that you do not fight. And he said, your greatest victory is in the fight that you have with yourself. And he would say the true meaning of karate is better human relations. Although the word in Japanese, kara and te, kara means empty, te means hand, and karate, do means way, the way of the empty hand. But that's the literal meaning. The philosophical meaning is peace, and peace within yourself. And when you win that battle, that physical battle now creates more intellectual calm, and that leads to a spiritual awareness where you realize you don't need to fight. You can actually make peace.
Interesting. Now, when the philosophy was introduced to you, what was your thoughts at that time? Were you like, cuckoo, or was it like, wow, this is amazing?
And I resonated with it instantly.
Awesome.
Instantly. It's as if every cell in my body had come alive and a truth had been discovered. Or should I say, my truth had been discovered for me, because I do not insist that my truth should be necessarily somebody else's truth, but it was something that resonated completely with, or let me just say, that began my process of self-discovery. And probably that was one of the first surreal moments of feeling like I've arrived home, if you know what I mean. Yeah, so there you go.
Now, you came to Dubai in 2007, I came in 2006, and you started doing what you were doing, and if I'm not mistaken, you got Brian Tracy to this country.
Yes.
How was that?
Yeah, it was an interesting experience. So Step Up, which is my company, we were the first organization to do a public seminar with Dr. Brian Tracy here in Dubai. So it was a fun experience because I lost $10,000 at that point in time. Educational, and of course, I mean, Brian is amazing. I follow him on YouTube, watch his videos, have gotten so much perspective from him. One of the wisest men on the planet, fair to say, in terms of processes, goals, achievement, great philosophy. And I think I did it quite... the person who I was working with was fairly persuasive in kind of convincing me that we should do it, and therefore we did it. That was the last public seminar that I did, because the work that I prefer to do now is workshops and one-on-ones and occasionally seminars where somebody invites me to speak. But that was the beginning of our business. It kind of launched my company out in the market. We got coverage on radio, on FM. Some of the participants who attended were from organizations who gave me some training work immediately after that event. So of course, that was really fantastic. And so it was a springboard to other things better and beyond.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, in the years I've known you, you started off with something and now you've evolved into something else.
Yeah.
You know, there's an evolution. I see a massive evolution. So for the listener, Arjun, could you tell us when you started off doing workshops. What exactly were you doing, and what are you specifically doing now,
Yeah.
which is, which allows you to serve the people around you, be it individuals or organizations?
Yeah, and that's a great question. It kind of makes me look within more than into my mind, into my heart, because rather than talk about how my content has evolved, I'm more. I'd rather talk about how my intent has evolved.
Okay.
And when I started training, it was a tool to make money. And because I was very good at my delivery and my content, and with God's grace, I still am able to do a very good job at it, folks would pay me top dollar for the work that I did, whether it was in a group setting, at a seminar, or one-on-one. The end desire for that activity was always an increase in my bank account, or the feeling of accumulation of finances, and therefore a feeling of strength and achievement through that process. And from 2007, that the shift that happened within me, to me now, my excitement to go into an event or a training program has to do more with who are the people who are at that program who I can shift to a higher state of awareness. My curiosity comes from the place of I wonder who it is and who are the people today who I can add value to. I'm curious to see which are the folks in my environment who I can introduce to themselves as a result of their interaction with me. And that has been the evolution. Of course, content-wise, there's always current material going on, because as you listen to the Brian Tracy's and Tony Robbins and the Joe Dispenzas and whoever else you follow of the world, Wayne Dyers of the world, you notice that your content continues to get updated. But if there's one thing that brings about great satisfaction in what you do, is the feeling with which you do it. Anthony Robbins says the secret to living is giving. Wayne Dyer says the true measure of your life is not in its duration, rather in its donation. My teacher Basil taught me many years ago. He said, it's nice to be important, but it's more important to be nice. And when you start to realize that it's less about me and more about we, the flow that you have in the communication process is at a completely different level altogether. And you realize that after a while that it is not even you who's talking, but the messages are flowing through you, rather you're channeling the information. And I find that even in one-on-ones, when my whole and sole purpose is to add value to that individual, the best material just comes through in the best manner that it should come through, and the person is elevated as a result of it. So that has been the evolution in intent, and that's what I encourage people to do, including the entrepreneurs who I coach. I get them to make, they say, how do I shift my mindset? I said, let's work on shifting your heart set. So when we shift your heart set, everything kind of, it's like the first domino that kind of knocks everything over. Then the mindset is automatic.
Yep.
And then the handset is also automatic, which is the action that you do, So it's the heart, then it's the head, then it's the hands, the 3 HHH kind of thing that flows. So that's how it is.
We'll come to this heart set in a while.
Yes.
You've been working for quite a long time. You've had many experiences in life. Failures.
Yeah.
What is your take on failures? How do you see failures as, what does it mean to you?
True. Yeah, absolutely. Failure is a word. And it's a word that has been given a meaning by society. And the meaning that the word failure has been given is bad, unpreferred, shouldn't happen, horrible, terrible, ugly, bad karma, bad luck, and so on and so forth.
I feel my energy going down.
Yeah, absolutely, we do. And sometimes in classrooms, if you get people to repeat the word failure, say the word failure 10 times, and our viewers can do that, our listeners can do that. Well, say the word failure 20 times in the next 20 seconds, and observe the emotions in your body, and you'll notice that you feel down and weak, and self-pity and all the negative, disempowering emotions start to seep into you. Rather, I'd like to frame it as an experience.
Okay.
So instead of talking about failures, when a client of mine is talking about failures, I say, let's talk about your most novel experiences. Let's talk about your greatest learning opportunities. And when we speak about failure in that way, so rather than calling it a failure, we speak about it as a learning opportunity or an interesting experience. Now the frame changes, and the emotion, energy in motion towards it changes. The Chinese have a proverb, and they say that the proverb that they say, may you live in interesting times. And they greet each other in this fashion. And the word interesting could be a blessing or it could be a curse. So may you live in interesting times, which means allow the flow to happen in your life. And sometimes you're earning more and sometimes you're learning more. And that's my perspective on failure now, and when I work with people. And so my preference is to change the language, because when you change your words, you change your world.
What was your perspective before on failure? Because
oh yeah,
it was like,
absolutely. My perspective on failure before was the one failure that I'm thinking about now, probably one of the biggest that I had in 2007, was massive damage to my ego.
wow.
Embarrassment that failure could actually happen to me, and what would the world think of me now that I've failed in this way? My reputation was under threat, and that affected me so much, what other people would think of me. So the ego pain, the ego hurts of that failure was perhaps even more important than the failure itself.
It's interesting you could bring up the word ego, and you said Dr. Wayne Dyer, and automatically for me it comes with the word which I've heard Dr. Wayne Dyer always used to say, edging goodness out.
Edging God out.
Edging God out.
Edging God out, yes.
So it's interesting, the ego coming into play. So that's failure. Your perspective is significantly very different to what it was before.
Yes.
In 2007, now we're in 2019.
Sure.
Success.
Yeah.
What is your take on success?
Yeah.
What do you perceive as success?
Yeah.
If someone was to come to you and say, hey, Arjun, you've helped a lot of entrepreneurs, you've helped a lot of people with their personal life, you've helped them in different aspects. Tell me the success formula.
Sure, absolutely. And that's a fair question too. And I'd like to kind of address it from two perspectives. And first is philosophy of my teacher, Basil Harris, who has been one of my greatest influencers in the last 21 years that I've been in business. And secondly, a gentleman whose videos I've been watching recently, a gentleman called Darryl Anka in the United States, who is what they call as a channel. And so let me start with what Darryl says about the concept of success, and rather he prefers to use the word excitement or happiness. And he uses a formula that has 3 tenets to it, 3 principles to it. So principle number 1, act on your highest excitement.
Okay.
That's number 1, act on your highest excitement.
Okay.
Number 2, to the best of your ability. So number 1, act on your highest excitement. Number 2, to the best of your ability. And number 3, without any insistence on what the outcome of those actions ought to be. So act on your highest excitement, to the best of your ability, without any insistence on what the outcome of those actions ought to be. Or to put it another way, when we're intending something, when we're desiring, when we choose to manifest an outcome, and that outcome could be a financially desired outcome, a relationally desired outcome, or a health or physically desired outcome. And when we actually use insistence, when we use intention rather, intention minus insistence is equal to manifestation.
Okay.
Yeah. And our insistence on a preferred outcome prevents the best outcome from coming to us.
Interesting.
So that's to me, that 3-point formula that I spoke about, and then the philosophy that followed thereafter. And then going back to Basil, where when I met him in Johannesburg, South Africa, for the very first time in 1998, the 3 principles that he lives his life by, and I continue to incorporate that. And he says, number 1, to every disadvantage, there is an advantage. To every disadvantage, there is an advantage. Number 2, I face every adversity with the attitude that the seeds of a greater benefit shall emerge. And number 3, I have the capacity to accept criticism without resentment. So I found this beautiful balance with these 2 philosophies, the former being more recent, the latter being the origin of where things started for me. And so once you have that foundation, and from then it doesn't matter whether you're a banker, an engineer, an architect, a bricklayer, or a taxi driver, or a consultant, trainer, coach, or a speaker, the happiness finds its way to you. Wayne Dyer says, there is quoting from the Tao, he says, there is no way to happiness. There is no way to happiness. Happiness is the way. So yeah, that's...
It's very, very deep. And here's the thing. A lot of people are insistent that they want a specific result, specific outcome.
Yes.
And now when you're dealing with corporates, or you're dealing with a corporate person, you're coaching them, what do you say to them for them to transform or make that shift?
Yeah.
What happens in those scenarios?
Yeah. So are we talking about training or coaching?
I'm talking about, let's talk about coaching, for example.
Sure. So let's say if it's a corporate that comes to me to coach some of their executives, for instance, I'm pretty forthright and candid with my clients, saying that the genre of coaching that I involve myself in is called life coaching. So therefore, if you want me to just coach this person such that he does better at his job, I'd rather not get involved in that, because I go beyond that and look at it from a holistic perspective. I'd rather get curious along with my coachee about what is holding him or her back from actually bringing forth performance into their work environment. And Basil taught me many years ago, he said there are 3 challenges that humanity faces. We either have a financial challenge, or we have a health challenge, or we have a relationship challenge. And sometimes we have 2 out of 3, and sometimes we have 3 out of 3 as well. And when you discover which of these 1, 2, or 3 that people are going through, which happens in a candid conversation with someone, when you engage with them in a life coaching journey, you are able to now discover what is causing the person to not perform the way they should perform at work. Now we start another journey of helping them to either resolve the situation that they are in, or dissolve the way in which they are thinking about the situation, which is to discover whether that scenario which is playing out in their life is an ABC or an AUC, whether it's an area beyond their control or an area under their control.
I love that. You taught me that, and I've used that in certain scenarios. And I remember, because I even used it to write an article, because it's a very interesting concept. ABC or AB, AUC.
Yes.
Areas under control, areas beyond your control, and very simple for a logical person easily can grasp it as well, and then extending into that holistic arena which you're talking about.
Sure.
Now, there's a lot of things which happen in people's life. And as we're coming closer to the end of this interview, what is that one thing which you would say to a person, especially when they're feeling horrible, feeling down, feeling like a failure? What can they do to uplift themselves? Because we have these ups and downs, and we're living in a life which is bombarded with so much information, so much competition, so much want, do. What can they do to ground themselves and uplift themselves without having that insistence that I want that outcome, I want that result.
Yeah.
What can they do?
Yeah, that's true, and that's a very fair point as well. And in the work that I do, and in my studies in psychotherapy, which has kind of been a fascinating journey for me over the last couple of years, I am now working with people to take them progressively through the emotional scale. I call it the upward spiral, and sometimes we're on a downward spiral. And probably the basest emotion, the lowest form of emotion is sadness, depression, or even fear, for instance, where you have despair, sadness, fear, depression, where people typically feel like crying. And then the next level of emotion after that is guilt, shame, or regret, and after that, so that's number 2. And I generally work with people. Sometimes if they're at that depression level, my goal is to get them up to the guilt level. Guilt is a negative emotion, but it's a lot better emotion than depression or sadness. So it's not a bad station to come to, especially if you're starting at the basemost station of depression. So you start off with depression, despair, sadness, come to guilt, and shame, and after that, the next is envy or jealousy, which is also a disempowering emotion, albeit a far better emotion than guilt, and a far better emotion than sadness or despair. And then from envy or jealousy, we come to rage or revenge. And rage or revenge is actually a very good emotion because it is the first of the dynamic emotions. All the emotions prior to that are static emotions, and now we come to dynamic emotions. From rage or revenge, we come up to anger, and from anger, we move up to the emotion of frustration. And the emotion of frustration is a very empowering place to be, because the emotion of frustration is just one station away from the emotion of hope. And so when I'm working with someone who is anywhere along this scale, and I'm giving you the short version because there are subsets to these emotions as well, and through conversation you identify these are the umbrella headings that I'm kind of outlining here. My endeavor, and I've worked with folks who've been depressed either through divorce or marital breakups or financial loss or losing a family member to cancer or themselves going through cancer. I've also had the opportunity to work with 4 suicide situations thus far. And my endeavor is to take them up one step at a time. Therefore, if someone is feeling sadness or despair, it is extremely important, very important, that they give themselves permission to feel that emotion. Think of it like a software when you boot your laptop. So you open your laptop and there's all that booting process and antivirus and all taking place. And if you interrupt that process, you are actually creating a situation where viruses can now infiltrate your laptop. So if somebody is sad, I actually encourage them to cry. And I've given assignments to folks, worked with a lady recently, corporate professional, doing really well, but in a state of denial after her previous relationship breakup. And after the first session, I gave her the assignments to actually have 3 crying sessions. Actually, I told her 4 crying sessions of 20 minutes each, and after negotiation and bargaining, we brought it down to 3 crying sessions of 15 minutes each. And I told her that was the last price. I'm not going to go lower than that. If you want me to meet you again, then you need to have completed 3 crying sessions of 15 minutes. She said, "How will you know?" I said, "I'll know, trust me." She came back for session number 2. Body language had changed. Her face had cleared. The facial muscles had relaxed. Her hair was looking better. Her face was calmer, and so forth. So when we give ourselves permission to experience these emotions, we allow ourselves to grow through them rather than go through them. And that process now takes you to a higher state and a higher state. And for each of these emotional states, I work on processes. And those processes help us to deplete, to expiate that emotion to its entirety, and then after that move to the higher state. And even after a lot of work, if we have arrived at frustration, that is fantastic, because you've moved up so many different levels to arrive at the station of frustration. And even if we take a break now at frustration, we can come back and work on some more stuff later on, because we're just one stop away from hope. And hope is the beginning. It's the first of the empowering emotions, from where now it's just an upward spiral. And in the short term, we may take 2 steps back, 1 step forward, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Like the stock market, on a day-to-day basis, there may be volatility. However, in the long term, there is growth. Somebody in finance understands this. In equity mutual funds, they say, stay invested. If you're investing in equity, stay invested. Don't look at your investment for 2 to 5 years. If you look at it on a day-to-day basis, it fluctuates.
Yes.
And emotions are that way. So when you stay invested to the process, now there is growth over a period of time.
Okay. finally, or let me say finally, on a day-to-day basis, what would you say to the individuals out there? What could they do in a matter of seconds to just uplift themselves, move forward, even if they're successful or even if they feel they're failures? What can they do to make it better for themselves?
Yeah. True. Absolutely. So many years ago, I read a book called Awaken the Giant Within by Anthony Robbins. It was one of the first self-help, self-enrichment books that I had ever read, and it transformed my life. I still vividly recollect I was flying from Mumbai to Singapore and Singapore to Sydney, and then I took a bus from Sydney all the way up to Brisbane. So it was a longish kind of journey, purposely chosen as such, just wanted a little bit of time for introspection, and this book kept me company all the way through. And Tony Robbins espouses a habit which he calls the hour of power. And he says, just like we have habits in the morning, getting up every morning, brushing your teeth, using the bathroom, getting a shower, maybe getting yourself a cup of coffee or a tea, what has really held me in good stead over the last 21 years is a commitment that no matter where I am, I do my hour of power in the morning. And my hour of power has 3 elements to it. As you can see, I love the number 3, right? And you speak about that also in the Power of 3 in the wonderful workshops that you do, Rohit, is physical, mental, and spiritual. And physical is the physical body. And the principle of physical exercise is one word: move. Just move. Just start shaking. Doesn't matter. Even if you start dancing on the spot, doesn't matter. That is also exercise. Just move the body. Don't trust your emotion if you are not in motion. And so that's you get it going. And also the body produces certain hormones like oxytocin, serotonin, endorphins, opiates. That actually get your blood flow to a better state and your mind to a better state to get you to think different. That's your physical. And mental is read something or listen to something that's uplifting. I highly encourage people to stay away from the newspaper or from news in the morning. I mean, when was it that media portrays positive news? If it bleeds, it leads, they say in the newspaper business. In the news business, negative news sells. And the worst thing to do is to read that negative news first thing in the morning. Someone says, but how will I get to know something? Don't worry, people will tell you. I'm not saying don't follow the news. I understand lots of folks are in businesses where they're required to, but just perhaps you want to limit it. Like alcohol. You drink, but you want to kind of keep it under control to some extent and measure how much you consume. And that's mental. Consume stuff from people who are uplifting, positive, and you choose your genre of speaker or author